You know who storms the field? Kansas storms the field. Stay behind in the stands where you belong.
A panel of Louisiana sports experts giving you the hot takes all season long. Michael Cauble, Matt Moscona, and Shea Dixon. This is Sports Takeover.
You know, we certainly are not the football team that I thought we were.
Oh, same, Brian. Same. Nobody saw that one coming. Not to the extent that it unfolded. Hey, good evening and welcome in to Sports Takeover. I'm Michael Cauble, joined by Shea Dixon, the Bengal Tiger on 3.com. Matt Moscona of After Further Review on ESPN Radio. We're here to chop it up and talk about that Tiger clunker to open the season in Orlando. Guys, really looking for a bright spot. I didn't find any.
I got a bright spot. I didn't go.
You didn't go. You didn't make the trip. I can tell you there was a nice calming breeze in the stadium. That was about the most pleasant part of my evening.
If you want a serious bright spot, I think Florida State is the best team LSU is going to play all year, and you were better than them for a half. You were the better team in the first half. You blew 2 red zone opportunities to get points. You got 4 defensive stops. You had an opportunity in the first half to do to them what they did to you in the second half. You just didn't capitalize. So there are things to build on there, but clearly I don't think any of us had LSU losing by 3 touchdowns.
Let's take a look at some of the plays in this one. And as you alluded to, Matt, it started off well enough for LSU. There were certainly plays to be made, but right on LSU's opening possession, they get inside the red zone and get 6 scoring chances inside the 10 and can't capitalize. Florida State, on the other hand, certainly had every opportunity, and they had the playmakers to get it done. This game, I felt, came down to just LSU not being the most talented team on the field and Florida State exploiting that. Mismatches at certain positions certainly blew this thing open. But Brian Kelly talked about their own miscues that led to their own demise.
We clearly were short in a lot of areas tonight, and that falls on me to get our football team to be better in most of the competitive areas that you saw tonight. Execution in the first half, the inability to convert in the red zone. You know, second half, didn't play with a sense of urgency. And then defensively, obviously, our inability to slow down the running game in the second half. You know, the counter play was problematic for us. We knew they were going to run it. They added a 2-back counter play, and we couldn't fit the play. And that's unacceptable from a coaching standpoint. You've got to be able to make those adjustments, and we failed to get that done.
Boy, did they. Shea, let's talk about it from your perspective. Where did LSU get off the rails?
Well, I think after halftime, obviously, which is, I think what's shocking, right, is that a year ago, they were a second-half team more often than not, and were making great halftime adjustments. Remember this. We talk about tough games they'll play and finishing with 10 wins a year ago. Yes, they won 6 SEC games. Everyone remembers Bama. The other 5 SEC games they won, none of those 5 teams finished with a winning record in the SEC. And they were trailing at halftime in more than half those games. I mean, most of them were dogfights. So I was impressed that they came out and just continued to drive down the field on Florida State and got some stops. I was floored that their second half looked like it did after how good they were at halftime adjustments a year ago.
Matt? Any insight to you?
We talked about it last week. I think everyone understands that LSU's secondary is the biggest weakness on this team. That's not a secret. Everyone talked about it. My contention was the offense was going to be good enough to overcome it. You put up 300 yards in the first half. This team has to convert when they get scoring opportunities, because if there were better players in that secondary on the bench, they'd be playing. We've talked a lot about Denver Harris. A lot of fans have talked about him all offseason. If he were good enough, he would have, do you think Brian Kelly was like, I'm watching Keon, nobody tackle Keon Coleman or guard Keon Coleman. I got a really good player, I'm just not going to play him. I mean, you can't go make a trade mid-season. You got what you got. So you have to find a way to win games with what you got.
I was a little surprised the way they schemed it, though, with Major Burns playing so close to the line for a majority of that ball game. knowing the help that they would need in the secondary. I felt like there was something that they could have done there. And then you obviously had some busted calls as well. We're going to talk about the secondary a little bit later in this show. One of the things right after the game, because we were in Orlando, that people I saw were at least talking about were the fourth down calls in this one. And a couple of critical ones early on in the game that may have helped extend the lead, to your point, certainly, right? LSU rolling the dice. Coach Kelly afterwards saying, look, these are calls you have to make. We just have to be better at executing them.
I think they were pretty easy calls. 4th and goal from the 1. That was a pretty easy one. We're trying to run the football with an option for Jaden to pull it. And, we'll have to just go back and look at the film and see what the looks are for him and do a better job of addressing that in practice and giving him those kinds of, pressure looks that force you to make those quick decisions.
Those 2 4th downs are very critical, especially playing a top 10 opponent, a top 5 opponent that we played tonight. A very good team that's been playing together for a while. They capitalize on those type of things. So not being able to come away with points and capitalize on those opportunities, it hurt. It set us back, like I said, a lot. The 2nd, 4th down, that was on me. I was doing too much. Just hand the ball off. Hopefully we could get into the crease and get a 1st down. And in the first one, I just got to lay the ball up. It's 4th down, give somebody a shot. So going back on film now, that's something I'll take to heart and look at it very critically.
But no, those are pretty standard 4th down calls and decisions. I think both of those were, read option kinds of decisions that Jaden was confronted with.
Good to hear Jaden admit that he needs to be better in those situations. Certainly with 4th down, you don't have anything to lose. You got to let it go there with if it's a passing play into the end zone. On that second one, and it was something we saw all night. Yes, he probably should have given the ball away, but slipping was a concern or an issue for this Tiger football team, even for Florida State to some degree on that turf. So you could see where Jaden's feet got pulled out from underneath him as he slipped on the turf. Guys, any problems with the 4th down calls?
Hindsight's 20/20, so I hate to always go back. And my general feeling, again, the next game I coach will be my first. But you had an opportunity to get points. I would have taken the points in both instances. My general thought on it is if you're on the road, take the points. If you're at home, your home crowd is going to give you an advantage somewhere, maybe to steal a possession. I'd okay being more aggressive. I would have liked to have seen them kick both times. If you do, you're up 9 at half. All else equal, which we don't know that it would be, but it changes the dynamic of the game if you get points.
I'll tell you what, you talked about the fans in that one. It was 80-20 Florida State. That place was rocky, no doubt, when they got the war chant going. When we come back, we're going to talk about one of the biggest questions you might have out there. What the heck is happening with Harold Perkins? That's after the break.
Sports Takeover will return after these messages. Now, back to Sports Takeover.
I know adversity is always going to strike at some time in this game, and this is our first real piece of adversity, if you will, that we have to address. And I'm confident our guys will and our coaches will rally in the manner that they need to.
Punched in the mouth right out of the gate. Matt over here TikToking.
No, it's for the gram.
For the gram. Doing it for the gram. Somebody needs to record this for posterity because, yeah, that was an egg that LSU laid, and now they do have to rebound from it. It was ugly in the second half. Certainly the score got separated, but I think one of the biggest question marks that most people have in this ballgame is what is LSU doing with Harold Perkins? He was such a havoc wreaker last season, and really they stifled him, had him play a spy role for most of the game. If you watch the game on the television broadcast, you can see Harold standing still for many portions, many snaps on defense, and unfortunately that is not what you want. He was not in your top 5 tacklers on this game, and basically it was because he wasn't involved in the mix. Guys, your thoughts on Harold Perkins, the way they're utilizing him so far? It's early this season.
That's the key, right? It's one game. Let's not make any sweeping judgments, but we also, it's not much of a question. We know what they're doing with Harold Perkins. They're trying to make him a full-time linebacker. I think the issue that this coaching staff is going to face is if he's a full-time linebacker and a game ends, it's very important to you, and he has no tackles for loss and no sacks and no forced fumbles and no picks, where is he impacting the game?
We've seen LSU do this twice with really talented players. Kendall Beckwith and Devin White. As freshmen, they had them as edge rushers, but they converted them in time into really good inside backers, off-ball linebackers. The difference is neither of those guys were All-American freshman edge rushers. Harold Perkins is. The other reason why this is a big concern is your secondary is not good, so you've got to rush the passer. You have an All-American edge rusher, let him rush the passer.
Yeah.
Pro Football Focus graded out seven rushes for Harold Perkins, 28 snaps in pass defense. Like, that needs to be in reverse.
Inverted, yeah. And is it just because they don't have anyone else to fill that role?
Well, Greg Penn had 80 tackles last year.
Greg Penn was a 100-tackle guy.
Greg Penn.
Yeah.
We're all chanting the same thing. Do you expect Brian Kelly to come out and talk about that today?
It's literally the first question that I'll ask him.
That everyone has, yes.
I mean, but it's an obvious
They've committed
question.
to this all offseason, though.
They have.
Why are you in week one going to just shift it and do something completely? Well, I could understand why. I'm just curious if they do or if there are bigger results coming for Harold at middle linebacker.
I was just curious because Jordan Travis was such a run threat. Is that why they felt like they needed to put him in that spy position where he basically just played center field all night? But going forward, that won't be the case. As you said, Jordan Travis probably one of the best quarterbacks LSU will face. Florida State, one of the best teams they'll face. Does Harold's role change when the opposition changes?
I've flipped on this. I mean, I was all on board with trust the coaches. They're going to make Harold Perkins into Devin White. But this team, again, that's fine, and that may be his long-term ceiling at 220 pounds. He may not be a great outside linebacker in somebody's 3-4 at the next level. But at this point, to help LSU football win games in 2023, you need someone to take pressure off your secondary by rushing the passer. You've got someone that's elite at doing that. Let him go do that.
Yeah, because I thought the defensive tackles played well. I thought the edge, didn't necessarily have an impact on the game. But there were situations where Wingo and certainly Guillory were getting after the quarterback. I think that you could. It was a tough ask of that LSU defensive front, much like we'll talk about with the LSU offensive line. On the flip side, they were better. The opposition was better than LSU this week, and you saw it. Shea, were you going to add anything there?
No, I agree with Matt. It's what's best for LSU right now is, and I think people are confusing of, okay, Harold's long-term future, NFL. Edge rushers make a lot of money. Harold Perkins is going to make a lot of money no matter what he's playing.
Yeah.
Let's not confuse that. You've got him for 20-something more games. How many games can you go where his stats are no sacks, no tackles for loss?
Let's talk about that LSU offense. Before we get too far, I guess let's hear what Brian Kelly had to say about Harold Perkins.
He's playing a position for the first time, so there's a learning curve there. He's learning how to play linebacker for the first time. We put him in a position last year where he was see ball, get ball. Now he's in a position where he's got to get over the top. He's got a back coming out of the backfield. He's got to be disciplined and can't lose his eyes on the quarterback mesh. Fourth down. There's a lot going on there, and he's trying to sort it out. You're catching a young player early on in his career, and he's going through some growing pains.
That he is. The LSU offense looked like it was going through some growing pains during parts of that ball game as well. Really.
Shea just made a great point.
Well, he's not young. He's a sophomore. He's young to playing linebacker, which is
a solidified position. About it. Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, we shall see. That Tiger offense, though, certainly has to get its act in gear as well. At moments, they look brilliant, and then moments, like we've talked about, unable to punch it into the end zone. 3 of 10 on third down, couldn't stay on the field, couldn't convert, absolutely zero run game, 113 yards, 75 of those, though, coming on 2 big plays. It was just mind-boggling to me to see how ineffective the LSU run game was. Shea, your thoughts?
This was the first thing I asked Brian Kelly last week, and he said, because we've started the same 5 offensive linemen in camp, our run fits are so much better. We have so much better understanding. That all could be true. We just didn't see any of it. Now, granted, again, back to how Matt started this out, FSU might be the most talented front 7 and D-line they play, but to pop one 30-yard run and then the rest of your runs be 11 carries for 14 yards?
From the running back.
That's worse than they did in this game a year ago, and that was a harbinger of what was to come in the run game. How long does this last now?
I do look at that Florida State defensive front, though. Fabian Lovett, Braden Fisk, Jared Verse. If you want the silver lining for LSU, it is that the team you played is the best team you're going to play all year, including Alabama. I would take every position group from Florida State over Alabama's except their secondary. So you're going to have time to improve as the season goes along, but that was very humbling because we all expected this offensive line to be much better. The one good thing, Will Campbell held up against Jared Verse. Jared Verse made one play in the entire game. So that was a dramatic improvement.
It was a heck of a play. He crushed him.
Fabian Lovett is a big kid.
Yeah,
Watching those back, 0. Ooh. It's a good D-line.
It was a great offensive line that Florida State threw out there as well. It was tough to watch this one. Brian Kelly talked about the offense and the run game in particular struggling.
Everybody's looking for that balance in the running game. You saw what we tried to do. We tried to run the football in those very important downs, and we weren't as effective. And we're going to go back and we're going to work on it, and we're going to continue to be diligent in those areas because we've got to be better at it. We've got a minimum of 11 more games, and I'm going to tell you now that we're going to be better, and we're going to commit ourselves to that.
And maybe some of that improvement will be because of the quality of the opposition. We'll find out. Certainly this week against Grambling, LSU should be able to run all over the field. When we come back, we're going to talk about the energy and the effort. Brian Kelly certainly brought that up a number of times in his post-game press conference. Is this team loafing around the field? We'll talk about it next.
Sports Takeover will return after these messages. Now, back to Sports Takeover.
You know, obviously Coleman's a tough matchup. Wilson's a tough matchup. You know, I thought we competed there. You know, no, I don't know that there was much more else that they could have done.
It's not often that you get a coach that just kind of gives up on an answer, but Brian Kelly didn't have an answer, much like his Tiger defensive backs didn't have an answer for Florida State's receivers. They were almost a foot taller than some of them at some point in coverage.
He's not lying. And I don't think he bailed on that answer. He's being dead serious. We said this was the issue on this team is that they have corners. This was a multi-year rebuild when Brian Kelly got here. They got by last year with transfers at corner and guys like Jay Ward who stepped in and did a lot of good things for them. It's a one-game sample size. Yes, those are talented FSU receivers. Yes, some of those guys are going to go on to play in the NFL. Spoiler, that's not the last time you're going to play NFL receivers this year. And I'm not sure you even have to be an NFL future receiver to have some success right now in this defensive backfield.
That touchdown right there by Keon Coleman, Deuce Chestnut's on him. The 41-yarder over the middle field, Deuce Chestnut was on him. The Keon Coleman touchdown in the right corner of the end zone, Major Burns was draped all over him. The first touchdown on the slant, you had two defenders right there. LSU's guys were in place. They couldn't make plays against a guy that's going to be a first-round draft pick. Like, you're not as good as them. Like, that's you can blame Matt House and what he might have been able, like, maybe that there's something they could have cooked up. Maybe pressuring the quarterback would have been a good thing. But your defenders were there. Their guy in 4 was the best player on the field all day.
Yeah, and I think it gets back to the points that you guys have already made.
And he's from Opelousas.
Yeah, that hurts, right? But as Brian Kelly said, they didn't have any room at the end, so they couldn't necessarily offer a wide receiver. So, yeah, hey, look, it is what it is.
You find room for that guy.
I think in hindsight, certainly they would. But, you know, this is a Tiger team that's going to have to make it happen as they go forward with those key players that they have. You know, and I think to your point, Harold Perkins playing a different position, getting a little bit more pass rush could have helped that out. Mason Smith, when he returns, is that something that can help this out? We'll find out how the Tigers move forward. We'll talk about it after this.
Sports Takeover will return after these messages. Now, back to Sports Takeover.
Do we look at this and say, this isn't the kind of football team we want to be? So, you know, when you have these kinds of losses, they're disappointing, and in some instances they're devastating losses. But it's how you respond to them, and they have a chance to respond.
How does LSU respond? That's the biggest question that LSU and Brian Kelly will face as they push forward with really the next 5 to 6 weeks of their season. Luckily for LSU, it sets up on the schedule very nicely that they have an opportunity to get some confidence, build it back before they get to the second half of their season where they might face a little bit more of the more challenging teams. Guys, locker room fractures, anything like that we're worried about?
No, I think that's what you trust Brian Kelly to be here for, and run the locker room and have a team that continues to build an upward trajectory. We talked about this right before we came on the show. Matt said it. What do they have, Matt? 6, 7 games coming up before Bama? 7?
7.
2 of them are non-cons against Army and Grambling this weekend. That leaves you 5 games. Only one of them is against a team that's even ranked right now, Ole Miss. There's a likelihood you're favored in all 7 games. No one's hearing it right now, but this team, in Vegas's eyes, could go into Bama 7-1 right now.
LSU still has the same national championship odds as Tennessee, by the way. It's and that's foolish to speak about right now, I understand, but we did see the same thing play out a year ago. You got punked by Florida State. You got better as the season went along. Teams are allowed to improve. I think this one will as well, and I'll continue to say it. I think the team you lost to on Saturday is the best team you're going to play in the regular season all year.
Yeah, reality check for this Tiger football team. They do take on Grambling this weekend. They can get a lot of things right. They are still relatively healthy if they get a couple of guys back. Obviously, Mason Smith, and I think their running back game or their running back room has to improve with a little bit of depth there as well. They have the opportunity to do exactly what they did, as Matt alluded to, go on a tear and work their way back into college football's elite. Thanks for joining us tonight. Of course, we'll have all the game coverage leading up to this weekend's kickoff, which should be a resounding victory for the Tigers inside Tiger Stadium.